Long, long ago, nearly 2,800 years in the past, there lived a blind poet by the name of Homer. He created two of the greatest masterpieces ever known to Western civilization. Revered as one of the most influential storytellers of all time, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey wove tales of Odysseus and Achilles, of Paris and Helen, names that would echo through eternity. Once upon a time, when monsters still roamed the earth, there was a mighty and prosperous kingdom that lay across the sea, facing the grand cities of Athens and Sparta. This was the kingdom of Troy, famed for its walls, said to be unbreachable, and built by the hands of gods themselves. Troy was ruled by King Priam and Queen Hecuba, who were deeply loved and respected by their people. Under Priam's reign, he was blessed with 50 sons and 50 daughters. Among them, the most admired was Prince Hector, the greatest warrior of Troy. As the eldest son, Hector was a valiant and honorable defender of his homeland. He loved his family above all, cherishing his wife, Andromache, and their son, Astyanax, more than life itself. But not all of Priam's children were as fortunate as Hector. His sister Cassandra carried a fate far more sorrowful. She had caught the attention of the god Apollo, who gifted her the ability to see the future in an attempt to win her love. Yet when Cassandra spurned him, Apollo, in his fury, cursed her, dooming her to be forever ignored, no matter how true her prophecies might be. Then there was Paris, Hector and Cassandra's younger brother, whose life was shadowed by prophecy from the moment of his birth. Before Paris was born, Queen Hecuba dreamt that her unborn son would bring about the destruction of Troy. Unable to bring herself to kill her child, she ordered a shepherd to take the infant far away and end his life. But the shepherd, moved by pity, could not carry out the dreadful deed and instead raised Paris in secret, a decision that would one day alter the fate of the world. Yet even the shepherd's mercy was not enough to fulfill the prophecy on its own. For Troy to fall, another child had to be born, far across the sea, in the city of Sparta. There, Zeus, the king of the gods, set his sights on Queen Leda. Transforming into a magnificent swan, Zeus approached her, and from their union, Leda bore 2 eggs. From these eggs came 2 sons, Castor and Pollux, and 2 daughters, Clytemnestra and Helen. Helen grew into a woman of unparalleled beauty, destined to become the most enchanting woman in the world. As Helen reached adulthood, her beauty captivated all who saw her. Great warriors, powerful lords, and even princes from across Greece traveled far and wide to ask for her hand in marriage. Among them were Odysseus of Ithaca, Agamemnon of Mycenae, and Ajax of Salamis. Yet, fearing her choice might spark jealousy and bloodshed, Odysseus proposed a clever plan. All suitors would swear an oath to protect Helen's chosen husband. With the threat of violence averted, Helen chose Prince Menelaus of Mycenae to be her husband. Together, they became the king and queen of Sparta. Though the other suitors left peacefully, they did not know that the very oath they swore to keep the peace would soon lead them into one of the greatest wars the world had ever known. Meanwhile, high atop Mount Olympus, another wedding was about to take place. Thetis, the goddess of the sea, was to marry Peleus, a mortal king. The gods and heroes from all corners of the earth were invited to the grand celebration. All that is, except one, Eris, the goddess of discord and strife, whose presence brought chaos wherever she went. Angered by her exclusion, Eris came to the wedding anyway, bringing with her a single golden apple inscribed with the words, "For the fairest." She cast the apple into the gathering, and as expected, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each laid claim to it. Unable to resolve the dispute, they turned to Zeus for judgment. But Zeus, unwilling to risk the wrath of any of the goddesses, passed the decision to a mortal, Prince Paris of Troy, who at the time was living as a shepherd in exile. One by one, the goddesses approached Paris, each offering him a tempting gift in exchange for the golden apple. Hera promised him dominion over all of Europe and Asia. Athena vowed to make him the greatest warrior the world had ever known. But Aphrodite, sensing the longing in his heart, promised him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris could not resist Aphrodite's offer and gave the apple to her. In return, she led him to Sparta, where she enchanted Queen Helen to fall in love with him. Overcome by this spell, Helen abandoned her kingdom and her husband, fleeing with Paris to Troy. And so the seeds of destiny were sown, setting into motion the events that would lead to one of the most legendary wars in all of history. Returning to Troy, Paris was welcomed with open arms by his father, King Priam. Enchanted by Helen's radiant beauty, the royal court eagerly gathered, hoping to catch a glimpse of their new princess. Yet, amidst the joyous celebrations, two voices of unease broke through the excitement. Prince Hector, Paris's elder brother, confronted him with anger, warning that his reckless actions and desire for Helen would inevitably bring war to Troy's shores. Hector's words were stern and filled with reason, but their sister Cassandra reacted with far greater intensity. Consumed by despair, Cassandra prophesied that Helen's arrival would lead to the downfall of Troy. However, due to Apollo's curse, her words fell on deaf ears. Seen as a mad woman, Cassandra was confined deep within the palace, her warnings dismissed as nothing more than lunacy. Meanwhile, back in Sparta, King Menelaus returned from a funeral in Crete to find his wife missing. He was informed that Helen had been abducted, and her ship was now heading toward Troy. Furious, Menelaus wasted no time. He called upon the Greek leaders who had once sworn to defend Helen, urging them to honor their oaths and join him in waging war against Troy. True to their word, the kings and warriors of Greece rallied behind Menelaus, preparing for a battle that would shake the world. The first to answer Menelaus's call was his brother, Agamemnon, the most powerful king in Greece, ruler of the wealthy kingdom of Mycenae. Agamemnon commanded the largest army and would soon lead the mighty Greek fleet to war. Following him were the other suitors who had pledged their loyalty to Helen: Odysseus, Nestor, and Diomedes, all ready to fulfill their promises. Among the kings, Diomedes was the youngest. As ruler of Argos, a city second only to Mycenae in power, he was both a skilled warrior and a clever statesman. Favored by the goddess Athena, Diomedes brought wealth and stability to his people. On the other end of the spectrum was Nestor, the eldest of the Greek kings. Thanks to the blessings of Apollo, Nestor had lived through 3 generations and accumulated unparalleled wisdom. A former member of the Argonauts and an ally of Heracles, Nestor brought invaluable experience to the Greek alliance. Perhaps the most reluctant of all the kings was Odysseus, the cunning ruler of Ithaca. Though admired for his wit and intelligence, Odysseus had no desire to involve himself in the war. When Agamemnon's envoys arrived to recruit him, Odysseus feigned madness, plowing his fields while mumbling nonsensically. Yet his ruse was uncovered when a soldier placed Odysseus's infant son in front of the plow. Forced to reveal his sanity, Odysseus rescued his child, ending his charade and reluctantly agreeing to join the campaign. Alongside these kings came Greece's mightiest warriors, Achilles, Patroclus, and the 2 Ajax warriors, Ajax the Great and Ajax the Lesser. Among them, Achilles, the Prince of Phthia, stood unrivaled. Known as the greatest warrior to ever live, Achilles possessed near invulnerability and was seen as the key to victory in any battle. When Achilles was born, his mother, Thetis, sought to make him immortal. She carried him to the underworld and dipped him into the sacred river Styx, whose waters bestowed invulnerability. But as she held him by the heel, that small part of his body remained untouched by the water, leaving it as his only weakness. Thetis, aware of a prophecy foretelling 2 possible fates for her son, either a long, quiet life or a brief but glorious one, was determined to protect him. When she learned of the Greeks assembling to attack Troy, she disguised Achilles as a woman and hid him on the island of Skyros. Yet her efforts were in vain. Diomedes and Odysseus, tasked with recruiting Achilles, arrived at Skyros. Using a clever ploy, Odysseus revealed Achilles' true identity by presenting gifts to the women of the island. including a set of armor. At the sound of a war trumpet, while the women fled in fear, Achilles instinctively seized the armor and prepared for battle. His destiny was now sealed. He would fight in the war that would cement his legacy as a legend. Once Achilles' true identity was uncovered by Odysseus' cunning plan, he set out to enlist his closest companion, Patroclus, to join him in the campaign. Together, they joined Odysseus and Diomedes and returned to Sparta to prepare for the legendary war. With the greatest warriors of Greece united, Agamemnon led a formidable fleet of hundreds of ships, poised to set sail. However, as the fleet prepared to depart for Troy, the winds fell silent and the seas grew unnervingly calm, leaving the ships stranded. This unnatural stillness was a punishment from the goddess Artemis, whom Agamemnon had offended by killing a sacred deer. Enraged, Artemis withheld the winds, preventing the fleet from embarking. To appease the goddess, a seer revealed that Agamemnon must make the ultimate sacrifice, his eldest daughter, Iphigenia. Torn between duty and his love for his child, Agamemnon reluctantly decided to deceive Iphigenia, luring her to the Greek camp under the pretense of a marriage to Achilles. But when she arrived, Iphigenia discovered the truth. She had been brought to the altar not for a wedding, but for sacrifice. With a heavy heart, Agamemnon raised the blade and took the life of his beloved daughter, satisfying Artemis's demands. With the sacrifice complete, Artemis restored the winds, and the fleet was finally able to set sail. As they neared the mighty city of Troy, the Greek forces prepared to confront the Trojan army and its allies in battle. Leading the Trojan forces was Hector, King Priam's eldest son, and Troy's greatest warrior. Standing beside him were allies from far and wide, including Aeneas, the son of Aphrodite, and the warriors of Lycia, led by the brave Sarpedon, a son of Zeus. Joining their ranks were the fearsome Amazon warriors, commanded by their queen, Penthesilea, daughter of Ares. Meanwhile, the gods themselves chose sides in the conflict. Hera and Athena, angered by Paris's refusal to award them the golden apple, sided with the Greeks. Conversely, Aphrodite, who had gifted Helen to Paris, championed the Trojans. Apollo, protector of Troy, also lent his aid to the city, while Poseidon, jealous of Apollo, pledged his support to the Greeks. Ares, the god of war, relished the chaos and destruction and joined the Trojans to fuel the carnage. The war raged on for 9 long years, with neither side gaining a decisive victory. The impregnable walls of Troy remained unbroken, and the Greek forces began to suffer from dwindling supplies. To sustain their campaign, Achilles led raids on neighboring cities, seizing wealth, resources, and captives. Among the captives were 2 notable women, Chryseis, given to Agamemnon, and Briseis, awarded to Achilles. When Chryseis was taken, her father, a priest of Apollo, traveled to the Greek camp and begged for her release. Agamemnon arrogantly refused and insulted the priest, provoking Apollo's wrath. The god unleashed a plague upon the Greek army, decimating their ranks. At last, Agamemnon was forced to return Chryseis to her father to appease Apollo. However, unwilling to lose face, he compensated for his loss by seizing Briseis from Achilles. This act deeply insulted Achilles and sparked a bitter feud between him and Agamemnon. Enraged, Achilles withdrew from the battle and retreated to his camp, refusing to fight. Without their mightiest warrior, the Greek forces were left vulnerable and began to falter against the Trojans. Hoping to end the war swiftly, Paris and Menelaus agreed to a one-on-one duel. Victory seemed within Menelaus's grasp as he overpowered Paris. Yet, just as Menelaus prepared to deliver the final blow, Aphrodite intervened, whisking Paris away to the safety of his chambers with Helen. Paris's cowardice disgusted Helen, and her love for him began to wane, casting a shadow over their once enchanted romance. Meanwhile, Hector, Paris's older brother, was filled with shame over Paris's cowardice. Knowing the war would continue, Hector bid a tearful farewell to his wife, Andromache. and his son, Astyanax, fully aware it might be the last time he would see them. For the sake of Troy's survival, Hector prepared to fight. Leading his army beyond Troy's mighty walls, Hector launched an assault on the Greeks, driving them back toward their ships. Without Achilles to aid them, the Greeks were unable to withstand Hector's strength and leadership. As the Greeks teetered on the brink of defeat, Achilles' closest companion, Patroclus, decided to act. Donning Achilles' armor to impersonate him, Patroclus rallied the Greek forces and led them into battle. The sight of Achilles terrified the Trojans, forcing them to retreat toward the safety of their city walls. Determined to turn the tide, Hector confronted Patroclus in single combat. With a powerful strike, Hector killed his opponent, only to discover, upon removing the helmet, that he had slain Patroclus, not Achilles. News of Patroclus's death spread quickly, plunging the Greek army into mourning. His body was brought back to camp, where Achilles, seeing his dearest friend lifeless, was overcome with grief and rage. Consoled by his mother, the goddess Thetis, Achilles resolved to avenge Patroclus by killing Hector and destroying the Trojan forces. Clad in a new suit of armor, forged by the god Hephaestus, Achilles stormed into battle with an unstoppable fury. Realizing there was no escape, Hector bravely faced Achilles in a final duel. However, Hector was no match for Achilles' unmatched skill. With a single thrust of his spear, Achilles struck Hector down. Achilles' wrath did not end with Hector's death. He tied Hector's lifeless body to his chariot and dragged it around the walls of Troy, desecrating the corpse as Hector's family watched in horror from atop the city walls. Unable to endure his grief any longer, King Priam risked his life and ventured into the Greek camp at night to plead with Achilles for the return of his son's body. Moved by Priam's sorrow, which mirrored his own pain over losing Patroclus, Achilles relented and returned Hector's body. Hector's body was brought back to Troy, where the entire city gathered to mourn their fallen hero. His wife, Andromache, and his son, Astyanax, wept beside his bier as it was carried through the streets. Hector's death marked the end of the Iliad, but Troy's fate was far from over. With Hector gone, Troy's greatest hope of survival had vanished. Meanwhile, Achilles continued to wreak havoc on the Trojan army, cutting down warriors one by one. However, as he attempted to scale Troy's walls, Paris, guided by Apollo, shot a poisoned arrow that struck Achilles in his only vulnerable spot, his heel. The arrow's venom coursed through his body, and Achilles fell, lifeless, his skin pale as snow. Though Paris succeeded in killing Achilles, he did not live long enough to savor his victory. The Greeks, enraged, hunted Paris down and killed him in retaliation. With the deaths of their greatest heroes, both sides fell into despair. But Odysseus, known for his cunning, devised a bold plan to bring Troy to its knees. The Greeks constructed a massive wooden horse, hollow on the inside, large enough to conceal a group of their finest warriors. At dawn, the Trojans awoke to find the Greek fleet gone and the wooden horse standing at their gates. Believing it to be a gift of peace, they hauled the horse into the city as a trophy. Only Cassandra, cursed to have her prophecies ignored, warned that the horse was a trap. Her warnings were dismissed as the ramblings of a madwoman. That night, while the Trojans slept, the Greek warriors hidden inside the horse emerged and opened the city gates, allowing the rest of the Greek army to storm in. Troy was engulfed in flames. King Priam was slain in his palace, while Hector's young son, Astyanax, was thrown from the city walls. Andromache, Hector's widow, was taken as a slave. After a decade of war, Troy had finally fallen, its glory reduced to ashes. The city of Troy, once thought to be invincible, now lay in smoldering ruins. Its magnificent walls, the pride of its people, were breached and broken. The Greek forces plundered everything, the homes, temples, and treasures, leaving nothing untouched. Those who survived the carnage were either slaughtered mercilessly or captured and sold into slavery. Among the few who managed to escape Troy's destruction was Aeneas, a Trojan warrior of divine lineage, as he was the son of Aphrodite. Leading a small band of survivors, Aeneas carried with him the hope of preserving the Trojan bloodline. They journeyed across the Mediterranean, enduring countless hardships, until they reached the shores of Italy. There, Aeneas and his followers laid the foundation for a new civilization, one whose descendants, Romulus and Remus, would go on to establish the city of Rome. Helen, the woman at the heart of the war, was eventually reunited with her husband, Menelaus. Together, they returned to Sparta, where they resumed their reign as king and queen. Despite the devastation her actions had caused, Menelaus forgave Helen, and they spent the rest of their days in peace. Upon their deaths, they were said to have been granted a place on the Isle of the Blessed, a paradise reserved for noble souls. However, not all Greek heroes found peace or happiness upon their return. Many encountered hardship and tragedy on their journeys home. Among them, no one faced a more arduous and perilous return than Odysseus. Odysseus, the cleverest and most cunning of all the Greek kings, spent 10 long years battling extraordinary challenges to make his way back to his kingdom of Ithaca. Along the way, he encountered terrifying creatures and unimaginable dangers, his trials becoming the stuff of legend. These adventures would later be immortalized in Homer's Odyssey, another of his monumental works. With the fall of Troy, Homer concludes the Iliad with a poignant reminder of the fleeting nature of glory and the devastating cost of war. The 10-year conflict had finally ended, but the price was incalculable destruction, not only for Troy, but also for the Greeks. Yet the tales of bravery, sacrifice, and tragedy would live on, enduring as a vital part of Greek mythology and a testament to the complexity of human nature.